So the, the topic of this presentation is what I call transition. And transition, to me, became a very important subject because it is a subject that is dealing with a transition towards what I call a desirable future. And that means that we are in a stage and we're going towards another stage. And this in between, I call this transition. And of course, if there is transition, there is a movement. And this movement is towards what I call desirable future, to design something desirable for all of us. In rafting, of course, but also in some other aspects of the world that we show now. So my name is Jean-Claude Razel. I'm the owner of Alaya, which is a rafting company based in Brazil, but I'm French and now live in France, but I spent 25 years in Brazil and I have my company, which has been a rafting operator for many years. This company is certified ISO for safety and risk management and also certified as a B Corporation for sustainability. And we've also been very much involved in competing rafting with the IRF over the last 15 years. I was manager of the Brazilian team, master team, under 23, under 19. So I was very much involved in competitive rafting on the Brazil side. But now I came back to France and I'm now a teacher in ecological transition in the university in France. So that's my main job now. It's talking about the transition. And that's why I suggested we could do the same for rafting, because well, rafting is part of the whole world and the whole world needs a new definition on these issues. So that's what I'm suggesting now. So what we'll be having is 2 webinars, one which is today, Thursday, 3 p.m. French time. So I'm not sure exactly from where you are, which time is that, but it will be next Thursday, the second part, exactly at the same time, on the same day, Thursday. So the first part is today, we're talking about diagnostic, how did we get there? And the second time, we'll be talking about solutions and solutions for rafting. And today, we're doing, of course, part number 1. And we do it in, first I make a 40-minute presentation, and then we will have a time for chat and discussion if there is a need for that. Okay, so I will start quickly with a history of rafting, which combines, as you see on this picture, with a history of sailing and rafting, you know, because you see there is some rafting, but also there is some sailing issues on this picture, and also some cooking issues, you see. So it will be a very old ancestor of rafting. And then there is some, especially in Iran and the Middle East, and Kianush gave me these pictures of this and then drawing, showing some very unusual way for us to do rafting using skin of animals. And but you see the former version and some picture of something more recent. So it did happen. Of course, we know that this is not exactly the way we understand rafting, but it gives a historic perspective. Same thing with this picture, which shows the biggest raft in the whole history, which is transporting timber in Canada, and which also is like a interesting way to see that people just use a floating device to go from one place to another. And there is also the military people who eventually used rafting to cross river and to move the troops from one place to another. The military always have a way to adapt for their own needs, every kind of invention. And we eventually turned into modern rafting, which is, well, on the left, recreative rafting. So people who come for their leisure, for vacation with friends and family to enjoy the beauty and the fun of going down the river. And as you know, also the competitive rafting, which is this picture, which is about, this story, this picture, which is a competitive rafting. So here you have the final of a head-to-head between Brazil and Japan. This was a world rafting competition in Korea. So of course, a very brief story, but all this has been organized, empowered, developed, and improved through the IF, the International Rafting Federation, who was established formally in 1997 and held the first guide training and the first official world rafting in 1998. And since then, there has been world rafting every year or every 2 years, depending on the Air 4 or Air 6 competitions. And important also to notice in the history, and this is the link with this subject today, in 2011, it was the first certified carbon neutral world championship in Costa Rica, and this was organized by the IF. So it was a major issue. So this gives me, of course, the word towards the subject of today, which is sustainability or transition. And I first want to invite on stage now with me a very important stakeholder, very important person who is never invited formally, but always is present. And this person is planet Earth. So planet Earth is this beautiful marble, blue marble. And this picture was taken in 1972 by Apollo 17 space mission. And this picture is the most famous picture in the history of photography, the most shared, the most printed, the most visualized picture of all. Because of course, it showed us that the Earth is round. We knew that by calculation, but now we know it by seeing it. It's also it's blue. It's really not obvious that the Earth was blue, but now we know it's blue. And it's also beautiful. We maybe didn't know how beautiful is the Earth. And of course, we didn't know how it was from space till this picture, but it's really, really beautiful. And the new information, and this is important to stress now, is that it's fragile, it's vulnerable, it's small in the end. And we will see that how can we keep up with maintaining the conditions on planet Earth the way they are. And this is not really obvious today, because we just realize that maybe it's not infinite. So the astronauts, especially the one who stay at the International Space Station, they describe what they call this overview effect. The overview effect is the idea that they are very vulnerable in their space shuttle. They have limited resources, and it's very important that they work together between astronauts. And when they look at planet Earth, they have exactly the same feeling. We have limited resources, and we'd better work together. And it's probably one of the main, most important understanding of all time is that planet Earth is limited. And this was given through this overview effect by the astronauts. And they also have the feeling of this vulnerability and saying that this is a totally different scale, you know, because the planet Earth is 4.3 billion years old. And this is not a human scale. We can hardly understand what is 1,000, 2,000 years. And here we're talking about 4 billion years, which is totally another scale. But eventually on this blue marble, over the whole course of evolution, well, the miracle happened on blue marble. And the miracle is what we call life, you know, life, and especially for what we know is life in the aspect of this creature who started like crawling on its 4 feet and then eventually managed to stand up and then eventually managed to create some tools and to reach the last stage of human evolution, which is sapiens. Sapiens, this is you, this is me, this is everybody you know, everybody you ever know, everybody you will ever know is sapiens. And this happens only 300,000 years ago. So if you compare with 4.3 billion years old of blue marble, it's really new. Of course, if you compare with human scale, still 300,000 years is a long, long time. But in the whole history of evolution, it's very small. So now you're taking, if I start the story 300,000 1,000 years ago, you probably would say that we're here still late tonight. But don't worry, I will make a very cosmic jump and go to Sapiens the way he, well, basically lived for 300,000 years, basically hunting, gathering, and making a living, and basically surviving, because life was really hard. And he was not the stronger, he was not the faster, he was not the most numerous. By the way, at the beginning, he was not numerous at all. So it was not obvious that human sapiens would survive. But eventually, he managed to make a living hunting, gathering, and basically surviving. And then in the course of the 300,000 years, sapiens was able to organize, to understand, to work, to create, to invent, and to go very, very far in some technological issues. I would say he was able to invent agriculture, and this happened only 12,000 years ago, able to create a carriage that would bring some stuff from one village to another. He was even able to make a boat, a sailing boat, beautiful boat, a lot of technology, I would say, to cross the oceans. Was able to create a windmill to create some energy, and to able to create houses and fortifications to protect from invaders. So from this Homo sapiens to this Homo sapiens, it's already a very, very big improvement of technology and knowledge. And this took 300,000 years. But what is important to understand is that is nothing compared with what was about to come. And what happened in the early 19th century was the Industrial Revolution. And at this point, everything changed. Everything's changed because we were able, through technology, to have machines do the job for us. Machines were able to make a lot of tasks that we used to do our own, and suddenly these machines, through the help of energy and through the help of devices that have always been improved, well, slowly but gradually, we were able to have all the machines working for us. So, you know, this carriage I was talking about, well, to carry goods from one village to another, well, we changed this to this new carriage, which we call a truck. And this truck is bringing much more good, much faster, much longer. And then from this agriculture and this guy making rice in some Asian country, well, we moved into this kind of a machine, which is a tractor that was able to prepare the land much faster, much more land, much bigger space. So this is also a totally new scale. Same thing from this boat, which is beautiful, as I said, which is a lot of technology. But if you want to bring goods from one place of the ocean to the other, well, this super tanker is much more efficient. I think he's not so beautiful, but he only loses in aesthetics, because in all other aspects, speed, size, quantity, he's much faster than the previous vessel that is only the best in aesthetics. And this windmill that would provide some energy, well, we moved to a real energy power plant, which is producing much more and much more energy than used to be the windmill. So we totally changed scale. And what is very important to understand, and I want to focus on this now, and I want to stop a little bit on this graphic, is to understand that all this very big change that we had since the Industrial Revolution, this has been possible only because of the use of energy. So when you look at this graphic, you have an exponential graphic, which shows that basically the only energy available on Earth was traditional biomass, which is wood. And this has been used the same quantity since the Industrial Revolution, but then starting from mid-19th century, starting to use coal, and then at 19th century, starting to use oil, and then gas, and then other some forms of energy, which is nuclear, hydroelectric power, wind, solar energy, and other renewables. What is important to look and to stress on this graphic is that first, every time there is a new source of energy, it doesn't replace the former. It always adds to the former. No source of energy has diminished, only increased. And the second very important information on this graphic is to realize that 82% is what we call fossil fuel, coal, oil, and gas. The three biggest areas, gray, blue, and pink on this graphic, if you sum them up, it's 82% of our primary energy consumption, and the three of them are fossil energy, non-renewable source of energy. So our world, our industrial revolution, our economic increase, industrial increase, has been possible only by a very intense use of abundant and cheap fossil energy. This is the way it happened. And these are facts. I'm not talking about what might have been or not. This already is fact. It happened only through the intense use of abundant and cheap coal, oil, and gas, which are fossil energy. So with the intense use of fossil energy, we moved from this small village to this megalopole. A tremendous increase, and this happened only in 200 years. And through this evolution also appeared what I call a new version of sapiens, which I call Homo economicus. Homo economicus is a guy who is a wallet in his hand and a smartphone in the other hand. And what he's doing, basically, he's working. He's totally addicted to growth. He is addicted to work. His main concern is money, and his hobby is consuming. This is Homo economicus. And this is you, this is me, this is everybody. This is, I would say, all the sapiens who were able to jump on the Industrial Revolution train. All of them didn't, but I would say the whole developed countries, or Western Europe, US, Canada, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, and some parts and some other countries, developing countries, and now maybe a third or a fourth of China and Japan, and of course Mexico, Brazil, all these countries now, they have part of the population who totally are Homo economicus. What they basically do is work in search of money so that they can consume, and the narrative of this is growth. So we have now a narrative which is economy is the most important thing in life, and that's why this new version of sapiens I call Homo economicus. So Homo economicus was so efficient that from this blue marble, that we talked about at the beginning of this presentation, well, Homo economicus put his foot everywhere on the planet. There is not a single spot on the planet that has not been touched by humans. It's a domination, total domination of sapiens, who was not maybe supposed to be the fastest, the biggest, but the strongest, but for some reason, this is the species that dominated planet Earth. And this has a name. The domination of men on planet Earth has a name. It's called the Anthropocene. The Anthropocene is the geological era, geological with period signs, geological era when the main factor of change on planet Earth is mankind. It used to be volcanoes, tectonic plates, some natural phenomena that would shape the world. Now, the main factor of change on blue marble is mankind. That's why anthropos, which is man in Greek, and Anthropocene means this era where the main factor of change on Earth is mankind. So what are the consequences of the Anthropocene? There is one good and there is one bad. So the good news about the Anthropocene is that thanks to these 200 years of increase of technology, of industry, of economy, we reached an unprecedented improvement in human living conditions on Earth. I mean, if you look at the curves of life expectancy, of child mortality, of part of people who are under poverty, a number of countries in democracy, some eradication of some deadly diseases. I mean, if you consider all this, it's unquestionable that the conditions of life of mankind on planet Earth has improved dramatically. And it's important to remember that, because there are some doomsters who really enjoy to say that everything is going very bad. But if you look at some key graphics, you can really check that there has been some great improvements in the life in the planet Earth. One of them being that before the Anthropocene, before the Industrial Revolution, almost everybody was working in the fields. And I can tell you that you and me today, instead of watching a webinar at home, we will all be in the fields growing potato, because at least in the Northern Hemisphere, winter is coming and it's a long winter and we need to have some reserves. So we would get ready and work hard from morning to dawn and not have some machines do the job for us. So 200 years ago, we would all be in the fields. So I would say now some people are, but it's not the life of almost everybody. So this is the good news. But there is bad news, always the second side and the other side of the coin. And the bad news is that, well, there are limits to planet Earth. And this is very, very shocking and important. We saw the blue marble picture. And when you look at it, it's small, it's vulnerable, it's limited. It's not infinite, definitely not. But we have a system based on growth. If you look at some key figures, and this is a picture come from what they call the Great Acceleration, this term that you can see at the bottom of this slide. The Great Acceleration starts in 1950, already more than 100 years of technology innovation on the machines. So the machines get very, very efficient. And suddenly you can see that in 1950, all curve, they change their shape and they grow exponential. So these graphics are the selfie of the Anthropocene. Now, if you look at some of them a bit closely, water use after 1950, incredible increase in use. If you have transportation, the figure starts a bit after maybe 1970, and with globalization, you can see the incredible increase in transportation. If you take marine fish capture after 1950, incredible increase, even if after at the turn of the 21st century, it stabilizes, but you see it's an incredible increase. If you take international tourism, maybe one of the most exponential curves of all of them. So, well, let's focus on three main curves. The first curve is GDP. Well, GDP, gross domestic product, which is the economic measure of growth. And when we say growth now, we're talking about economic growth, as if the only growth that is possible is economics. So we are very much influenced by GDP as the new index to say if you're successful or not. All governments are elected on the promise of delivering a 3% growth per year in the GDP, because this is the system, the way the system works. If you have 3% GDP, you have jobs. If you have job, you have consuming. If you have consuming, government get tax. If they have tax, they can invest, and so on. And in the invest, they create more job, there is more consuming, and it always accelerates. This is the way we've been working along the Anthropocene, and even more so since the Great Acceleration in 1950. So you see, the GDP, global GDP was kind of flat till 1950, and suddenly after 1950, it goes totally exponential. And the 3% per year, it seems not that much, but 3% per year means doubling in 24 years. So that's fast. It means that every generation or so, you have a double economy will double. Imagine it from what it is now, we need to double the world economy, means we need to double everything, all machines, all the energy consuming, all the use of materials, and everything will double, of course, garbage and plastic and all that. So, I mean, doubling at the size it is now is virtually not realistic. But still, this is the way we operate. The second graphic is the size of world population over the last 12,000 years. So it's shocking to know that it took 300,000 years since the arrival of sapiens to reach the first billion. This happened in 1803. In 1803, we had the first billion of sapiens on Earth. And it took 200 years to reach what we had this week. And this week was sapiens number 8 billion. We are officially 8 billion sapiens on planet Earth this week, end of 2022. So it means, again, it took 300,000 years to reach 1 billion, and it took only 200 years to reach 8 billion. So 7 billion more in 200 years. This is more than any other curve, exponential. And the question is, how far can we go? And the third graphic is the graphic I already showed you about energy, because GDP and energy are totally correlated, because as you see, so there is an always increase in the use and consuming of energy, and especially fossil energy. So these three graphics, energy, GDP, population, all of these, they express the exponentiality of our world. Our world is growing exponential, and it has been the case for 70 years now, since 1950. So the question we ask ourselves now, which is the good question to be asked, which is exponential growth sustainable? And maybe you'll find it curious to realize that this question has been asked already for a long time ago. In 1972, the Club de Rome, which is a think tank of humanists, especially European, asked the MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, which was one of the most renowned scientific body in the world. In 1972, they asked them to work on the limits to growth. What are the limits to growth? This is 1972, exactly 50 years ago. In June, last June, we celebrated the 50 years of the issuing of limits to growth. And this was led by these scientists of MIT, especially this woman, Donella Meadows, and her husband behind, which is Dennis Meadows. This is why this report is also very much famous as the Meadows Report. It sold 12 million copies. It was translated in 37 languages. It was presented in all places of power, in the White House, the European Union, the United Nations, etc. I'm not talking about a secondary, in the garage, small production of lunatic scientists. I'm talking about top scientists in the world, officially embedded to produce a report that was presented to all leadership and governance worldwide. And what they did basically was the first modelization of system Earth. And they used 5 variables. One is resources. One is industrial output. At that time, it was the Cold War. So the focus was on industry and the fight between the US and the Soviet Union. One, of course, is population. One is food. Of course, if you have people, you need food for them. And one of them would be pollution. And they did the first modelization, which is modelization means that they take some variables and they adapt them, they adapt each other, and they see the influence on one another on a long period of time. And they did 9 scenarios. These 9 scenarios, 8 of them showed that if we keep growth the way we do, and that was 1972, if we keep growth the way we do, there will be pollution and resource scarcity start to impact industrial production, food and population in decade 20 or 2030. Or they would say like a collapse in the decade of 2020 to 2030. That was 1972. They did 8 simulations that showed that. And they did a 9th simulation, the only one that showed there is a way. There is one way in 1972. And that way was sustainability. They didn't use that word at this time because this word happened a bit longer, but they gave the concept. And what is the concept? Is that you have the economy, of course, important, essential. Everybody needs to work. Everybody needs to eat, to wear clothes, and to have a house. Of course, so this means like having an economy running. Of course, we have some environmental issues, which is nature that we use of all these goods from, and of course we have social because we have people working. So if you manage to bring those 3 together, and at the heart of these 3, there is a kind of sweet spot that we call sustainability. If we can bring these 3 together, then there is a way. So the 9th scenario of the Meadows report is called sustainability, harmonizing social, environmental, and economic needs of modern world. They say if we start this now, there is a way. If we don't do that, we will still be in trouble. Did we do it? Well, you know, we didn't. Sorry to say, you all know, we didn't do that. And that's why we are now facing the time that we are getting into a time where, well, this excess of economy mindset, excess of use of energy, this brings us to a very difficult and hazardous time. And as if this was not enough, 2 other things appeared at the table, which are also very much important, which is climate upheaval and biodiversity eradication. So let's spend a little time on these 2 issues. So climate issue, maybe you're familiar with that, but I like to present it like, I would say, a simple way, making it simple and easy to understand. So climate has to do with greenhouse effect. Greenhouse effect is that, well, when there is heat coming from the sun, most of it escapes back into space. But okay, so going back to greenhouse effect. So the greenhouse effect is that the heat coming from the sun, most of it escapes back into space, but some of it is trapped. And this is a natural phenomenon. The atmosphere that is around Earth makes this greenhouse effect working. And this is very cool and very important because thanks to this, we have a 15 degrees average temperature on planet Earth. And this is what made the miracle of life possible, because we have a stable temperature of average 15 degrees of temperature on planet Earth. And this is because of the size of atmosphere and our distance to the sun. If you take Mars, for example, which has a very thin atmosphere, it means that almost all the heat coming from the sun goes back to the atmosphere. No heating is trapped, no greenhouse effect. So the average temperature is -50. The miracle doesn't happen when it's -50. Life, the way we know it doesn't happen. Maybe in another way, but not the way we have it on planet Earth. And if you look at Venus, on the right side of this graphic, you see that Venus has a very thick atmosphere. That means that most of the heat that gets into Venus' atmosphere is trapped. So the greenhouse effect works very fast, very high, and the average temperature is 420 degrees average temperature on Venus, where also life, the miracle as we know it, doesn't happen. So, I mean, we have the ideal conditions for life to thrive. And this is exactly why it happened. A stable average temperature of 15 degrees. Well, what's happening? because of human activity, the atmosphere is thicker, more gas is trapped in the atmosphere, and the greenhouse effect is just accelerated, is working faster, better than it used to. For many decades, people thought that it was natural, a normal phenomenon. Now we have the last reports of scientists that say that it's no doubt that this is caused by human activity, mainly because of our economic activity, mainly because the use of energy, mainly because of the use of fossil energy. Because when we burn fossil energy, we release CO2 in the atmosphere. So the use, intense use of coal, oil, gas, because of the use of so many machines working for us to do anything, also doing agriculture the way we do it, especially cattle, especially mono-intensive agriculture. All this makes that we release a lot of CO2 and also methane, CH4, and also nitrous oxide, N2O, which are other greenhouse effect gases, less present but more powerful than CO2, but CO2 still is the reference. So it means that we are accelerating this natural phenomenon of greenhouse effect. This is what we are doing through our activities. So when people tell you this is an increase of 1, 2, or 3 degrees, you would say, well, 1, 2, 3 degrees is not so important. I mean, if tomorrow is 2 or 3 degrees more, I just wear a jacket and that's fine. Or I take off a jacket and that's fine if it's 2 or more, you understand? But let's have a look at this graphic, these maps. On the left side of the screen, you see a map of Europe 22,000 years ago, which is before the end of the last glaciation era. So Scandinavia has 3 kilometers thick of ice above it. There were no channel between France and England. The oceans were 120 meters lower. It was very dry, very cold, and of course, miracle was not happening so fast. It happened already, but it was like kind of frozen. Then, so 22,000 years later, you have on the right, Europe as we know it, you know, the way that Europe is shaped and is working. You know what is the difference in temperature, average temperature between the left map and the right map? Well, the difference, it's only 5 degrees. So when people say 1, 2, 3, 4 degrees is not much, well, it's not much if we're talking about weather. But I'm not talking about the weather tomorrow. I'm talking about climate. And climate-wise, 5 degrees is huge. Maybe the best way to express that is that if you think that the planet is like your body is 37 degrees, right? This is the normal temperature of human body. If you have 3 degrees more, 40 degrees, you feel very bad, right? Fever, high fever, you feel very bad, very bad. And if you get to 5 degrees more, which is 42 degrees, you're dead. Well, for the planet, it's about the same, you know. 3 degrees more is very serious. 5 degrees more is deadly. So another way to present it also is to show you that this was the way planet Earth was 5 degrees before, 5 degrees less, 20,000 years ago. This is the way it became, the way we know it, the kind of river we love to go rafting. And if we have 5 degrees more, this is the way that planet Earth will be. So minus 5 degrees, a glacier, 5 degrees more, a desert. This is how it is. But as you know, Sapiens is curious, Sapiens is active, Sapiens always tries to find a solution to everything. So in 1988 was established the IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is the United Nations body to assess governments on climate change. And they just issued their 6th report. The 6th report was issued in 2022. And the consequence, the conclusion of this report is quite clear. First, now there is no longer doubt that global warming is caused by the increase of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, and this is due to human activity. No more that. There is no serious scientist that question that. The second thing is that if we have more than 3 degrees in average temperature, this has uncontrollable consequences. 5 degrees more is devastating for human life. So these are really scientific data now. And the third thing is that it's still possible to limit the effects of global warming. It's possible, but this transition, and now you understand why I call this transition, this must happen now. We don't have much time to wait. No, the window exists, but it's still getting narrow. So we have to act now. Now, I want it after climate. I want to talk a bit about biodiversity, which is also a very important aspect on life on Earth. Well, biodiversity is all the big tribe of the living that we share planet with. But it seems that we forgot that we share planet with other species, and we are so powerful, we are so dominating, we have been able to spread out all over the place, and it seems that we are more important, more valuable, or more relevant in life than other creatures. Well, I think this is very questionable. What we can see is a mass extinction of biodiversity on Earth now. Biodiversity is really under attack. 1 million species are already endangered, and 60% of vertebrates, invertebrates, insects, mammals, species have already disappeared if you compare to pre-industrial levels, pre-industrial evolution levels. And the main thing is that their habitats are destroyed. We are using so much space for our living and our activities, agriculture, mining, entertainment, and so that there is no longer space for all these biodiversity, animals and plants, basically. Some basic phenomena like photosynthesis or pollination, which are so essential to the survival not only of biodiversity, but also of us, these natural processes are threatened. And a forest like Amazon will soon no longer be a carbon sink, through photosynthesis. Forest just absorbs carbon. So as we need less carbon in the atmosphere, we should protect a lot of forest. But no, we are destroying forest, and the Amazon, which is a big carbon sink, should no longer be. And the list is very long. I tried to be short here, but the list showing that biodiversity is under attack is long. Okay, so the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, who is a diplomat, who uses very carefully his words in his position, of course. That's his job. This is maybe his main quality. Well, he's saying that we are under direct existential threat when talking about the loss of biodiversity or climate change. So, if a man like this uses these words, it's because it's quite serious. So we need to do something. And likewise, we have the IPCC, we have the IPBS, which is the equivalent for biodiversity. It's an intergovernmental platform that assesses government on biodiversity, and they say the situation is really, really dangerous. So biodiversity and climate change are only 2 of the 9 planetary boundaries. And this is a work also carried out by scientists, mainly from Stockholm Resilience Center, the Swedish body, and the scientist called Johan Rockström, a very important scientist, who showed that we have 9 planetary boundaries, 2 of them being climate change and biodiversity, and we already overcome 6 of the 9. So, we're getting close to a very delicate and serious situation. So due to both the excess of energy consumption and to planetary boundaries, what we can say is that the era of infinite growth is over. I want to repeat, the era of infinite growth is over. We can no longer operate on an everlasting growth-based system. It simply doesn't work. But we are not prepared for that because our economic system is based on growth. All politicians of Ministry of Economy of developing countries, they always think that the main thing we have to do on daily life is growth. So we have to rethink that to be able to find a solution which brings a desirable future, which brings richness, which brings prosperity, that bring health, education, infrastructure to mankind, without this being based only on economic growth, which is productivist, extractivist, and consumerist. So we have to change this mindset, what I call to change narrative. That will be basically the topic of the next chapter next week, when we will talk about new narratives adapted to rafting. But this is very important to understand. We can no longer operate on infinite growth forever. This is over. And who is telling this is not me, is scientific observations and demonstration. This is clear now, scientifically proven. So we need a new narrative. So this Homo economicus way, well, as this guy says, I like this picture because it's a bit of a, it's kind of fun, you know. It says, well, go back, guys, because this is a trap. We need to find another way, another solution. So what are options? First, because before talking about options, and which will be the topic of next class, I want to tell what are not options. So the first options that many people use is what I call denial. People just deny because it's disturbing, because it's uncomfortable, because it shakes too much some beliefs that are very deep inside us. So, I mean, denial is maybe the options we mostly used, and we've been using denial at least since the Meadows report in 1972, and since the picture of Blue Marble in 1972. Since then, of course, main attitude was denial. We were busy growing, and we just denied this happened. But now we have scientific evidence, denial, and also we observe, you know, so those of you who spent last Northern Hemisphere summer on planet Earth, well, most of you saw that climate was really disturbing. So it's a real question that people now feel. That's why the consciousness is growing fast, which is good. It's growing fast, but it is much too slow at the same time. So first thing I want to know that denial is not an option. The second thing is the belief that technology will save us. Well, I think technology is a very important part of the solution, but blindlessly think that there will somehow a magic system arriving from technology, then from 9 today we solve our problem. This doesn't happen. You know, technology takes a long time in the development, in the processing before it becomes like decarbonized energy. No coal, no oil, no gas, it will take time. So technology, yes, but for what use, for what purpose? We cannot blindlessly believe that technology will save us. Technology as the savior, not an option. So sustainability, well, this was the option that we hoped would work, but basically what we did is this kind of sustainability. A very big economy with a little social, a little environmental. We didn't practice it even the 3 categories. So sustainability this way, again, is not an option. So we need a new narrative. And this new narrative is what I call transition from growth to sufficiency. And this will be the topic of next chapter that we'll have together next Thursday, same time. So thank you very much for your attention. I will stop sharing my screen here, and I will answer to questions for those who are interested in chatting on this subject with me now. You're welcome for